state over on the Pacific
Beautiful.
Coast. Well, not
All
quite on the
right.
Pacific. We're inland.
We're live.
Hey,
Samuel, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Sonny. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yes, I am quite excited. This is one of my last meetings for the day. It's Thursday. We got to talking earlier. It sounds like this is going to be a fun one. I have a bit of a format, not too much. Just my first thing is I like to kick off with just like a minute or two or whatever on what you do. Yeah, like what advertising. Just call it the pink elephant. And then somehow, some way, we end up back there by the end of the conversation. But maybe just give people a bit of a flavor in terms of what's your superpower and what do you do at what advertising?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sonny. So what I do is I run an advertising company with my wife, Shalane. We co-founded this particular business of ours. We're both serial entrepreneurs. This particular one, What Advertising, we started it in 2020. And we just dived really deep into high quality advertising for mostly service-based businesses, a little bit of e-com sprinkled in there. And that's just been our absolute bread and butter ever since. And so that's Google Ads, Microsoft Ads, Meta Ads. Those are all things that we do and serve our clients with. And if the client is a good fit for advertising as a traffic source, we can consistently get just great quality leads that turn into real business. And that revenue ideally goes to the bottom line to some degree as well, if we get good returns. So that's it in a nutshell.
If people stick around and watch this whole thing, do you think you'll be able to share, like, I don't know, one nugget or two on how to crack Google Ads? Because I'm sure a lot of people are probably wondering. Yeah. Okay.
100%.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So let's put that on ice. We'll come back to it in a couple minutes. You grew up in Scotland, correct?
That's a complicated story. To a degree, I grew up in Scotland, but a lot of my childhood, strangely enough, was spent in Central Asia in two countries, in Turkey for a year or so, and then Uzbekistan from about the ages of 4 to 9, where my parents did humanitarian work over there. And I've been extremely obsessed, you might say, with poverty alleviation since that kind of an upbringing. And then around 9, 10, came back over to Scotland, did high school and university there. And then there's more to the story beyond there, but I'll leave that for a sec.
And then how do you pronounce the name of the university that you went to? Strathclyde, is it?
Strathclyde, the place of useful learning, so they say.
Yeah, so what did you study and how did that experience, shape you?
So that was an interesting one because I've always been sort of engineering minded to some degree. And so I thought engineering would be absolutely the career for me to focus on. And so I went after an engineering degree. Turned out it was 2 degrees. I didn't quite know fully what I was getting myself into. It was a joint degree between electronic and electrical engineering, which is so difficult. I have so much respect for people who go full-time into that career. That is really, really tough stuff. And then computer information systems, which involved a lot of software development as well. But the really cool thing that gave me insight into was all the way from programming on a printed circuit board and process like CPU processor design, all the way up to high-level programming. I got really the full gamut of experience in terms of what makes computers go. And while that gave me a lot of good experience, right towards the end of my degree, I realized that engineering really wasn't it for me. Full-time software development wasn't quite it for me either. And so I kind of started getting into entrepreneurial circles right at the end of my degree, and then took an immediate left turn straight into business right after graduating. And
then you also co-founded, was it called 3 Before Limited?
Yeah, so that was the first. That was the first real business, and it's called 3 Before. It's based on some nomenclature in the medical practice space in the UK, where GP practices, general practice offices, they don't want too many inquiries, strangely enough, because it's public healthcare. And so they want to make sure that patients get directed to alternative services if that's more appropriate. So there are like 3 things and resources you should go to first. And so my business partner and I, we built a solution for medical practices, which was a really intentional user experience led website design for medical practices that helped to direct people towards these other services if the practice wasn't right, but made sure they could get right in contact with the practice if that is exactly what they needed to be doing for their particular medical needs. And what was really neat about that was it gave me an idea of scalable software right away, because we could update our core system and all of our client websites would update. It was an extremely custom job done using Laravel.
Cool. So I guess my deeper question there was what drew you to the world of entrepreneurship so early?
Well, I always liked disconnecting income from time as much as I could, and I kind of got a big brainwave around that when I was about 15 years old.
Okay.
And this is when, I've always been kind of tech savvy, and I would go around school and I would ask who needed help with their laptop if their laptop was slowing down, and I'd go and do malware checks and defrag their hard disk and give them back a laptop that felt brand new again. And then I went to a church that needed some help with all their old computers, and I charged per computer and laptop that I was working on. And I had several going through these tests, and I had all these systems built out, and I had everything following, all the computer following these scans and systems. And I realized as I was sitting there letting the laptops all do their thing, at one point in the process, I realized I'm being paid per computer here, but lots of things are running in tandem at once. And I worked out my rate with how much time I put in. My rate was something like £60 an hour, which is like, I don't know, like $80 an hour or something. And I was 15. I was like, hold on a second. There must be other ways in which I can accomplish this sort of productivity efficiency while providing genuinely that amount of value to a customer. And I think that's where it really got under my skin. I was like, there are smart ways to provide value and to also extract value for yourself out of the market in a fair way.
I love that. So you landed in America with a duffel bag full of whiskey.
Yeah.
Tell me that story and what made you leave Scotland?
Love, man. I fell in love. That is really the reason why I'm not in Scotland anymore. I honestly had no idea that I would end up in the US. I kind of had some designs on Canada. Curious that you're from there or lived there. And basically, I had a really odd experience where I was working on a podcast. And the guy who was running the podcast, I was helping with the online community, hosted a couple of episodes on there. It was called Successful Dropout. That's a whole other conversation if you want to go there. But one time I got on a Skype call back when we all used Skype before Zoom took over the world. And I was talking to the guy, Kylan, and he said, I've got someone for you to meet. And he introduces me to his sister, Shalane, who happened to be visiting Scotland later that year. And he said, could you show her and her roommate around? I'm like, absolutely. I love showing people the incredible countryside and all the beautiful cities and old buildings of Scotland. I'd love to do that. And so we talked a little bit, Shalane and I, pretty casually leading up till that trip, although it became quickly obvious that we were becoming more curious and interested in each other. And of course, when you meet someone online versus meeting them in person, like you've got no idea if there's going to be a big gap or if it's going to be a congruent experience. The second we met each other in person, it was this rainy night in Scotland. It was this rainy, dark November night. She stepped out her Airbnb and I saw her way down the street, and I walked towards her and we both walked towards each other and gave each other a big hug. And there was like this level of magic and chemistry in that moment that was just right out of a storybook. And from that moment, we have been inseparable pretty much. We had to do long distance for a while, of course, which was extremely painful. But we've just never stopped talking and, being with each other since then. But at that point in time, I had that website business kind of going, and I had a couple other projects I was working on. And so I decided to just take a trip over to the US. But that did mean I had to kind of leave what I was working on a bit on the back burner. And I knew that I couldn't really rely on it for revenue for paying my own bills. So what I did was I packed my bag full of as many bottles of whiskey as I possibly could. And I took that over to the US. And the very first day, I arrived in Yakima, where I live now in Washington. I need to be careful about how I say this, but there was someone who valued a particular bottle of whiskey at about $600. And that was the first one. It was this lovely bottle of Dewar's. It was a 30-year blend. I wish I could have tasted it, but I never tasted it. It went into someone else's possession. So many bottles of whiskey ended up in other people's possession over the next few weeks, and that gave me enough to rent a room from Shalann's other brother, have a roof over my head, kind of like figure out what my next moves were. Spent as much time as possible as I could with Shallann, but I did manage to run off to an entrepreneur conference in Boise in Idaho, where I met a few of my first digital marketing clients. Little did I know back then, but I started taking on other projects like, basic WordPress, website development, SEO, some paid ads. And I saw the demand in the market was just rampant for digital marketing services. My last bottle of whiskey didn't leave my possession. Is this amazing bottle of Ledaig from the Isle of Mull, an 18-year bottle of whiskey. And I served that at my wedding because Shallann and I decided we're going to get married. This is it. I'm going to stay and be here. And this is where we're going to start the rest of our lives. But once I had no more whiskey left, I needed to find something else to do. And I couldn't go back to really the other businesses I was working on and back in Scotland. And so I really leaned into digital marketing. And from there, leaned into the paid ads side, especially going into 2020. And that's been the focus ever since. And that's how that kind of comes full circle into the advertising story once again.
That's super cool. So what was it specifically about Google Ads that clicked for you over, other types of marketing?
Clicked for me, huh? Pun intended or not. Where it really clicked for me was, out of all the things that I had been doing on a more general basis with digital marketing for clients, where I saw the most tangible, direct results, reliable results was from Google Ads. And this is what started to kind of mesmerize me about the whole technology of Google Ads. I still think to this day it's the gold standard in online advertising. Some businesses, Meta Ads really is the gold standard, but for most businesses, especially if you are in service, the gold standard is Google Ads, because nowhere else can you go somewhere and say, hey, I need this solution. It could be something as simple as, I need my toilet fixed. And then you immediately get highly rated plumbing companies or whatever the company is. And if they've invested money in ads, then they show up right away. And Google rewards relevancy, not just with their organic results, but in their advertising results too. So the better and more accurate and more relevant your advert is, the better you connect with your customer, and the better win-win situations exist in a business sense, where people get a great service that's fair, meets their needs, solves a problem for them, and the business also benefits and gets to grow and acquire more customers and gain market share. And so there's nothing like that that's ever existed before. And we've yet to really see the next iteration of advertising come online inside of LLMs, although that is here, just untested, but here. And I just think it's an incredible technology that serves so many businesses beautifully.
And so when you first started managing ads for clients, was there like a moment where you thought, okay, this is my thing?
A moment. I don't know if there was a particular moment in time where I thought this is exactly the thing. And part of that is because we're not just an advertising company. People find it pretty hard to swap us out with just some other advertising vendor. And the reason for that is we're we're very, very good at infrastructure. And so I'll use an analogy. Do you ever watch Formula One? I'm sure some of your audience do.
Of course. Yeah.
So Formula One, the most technologically advanced motorsport in the world. These days, every team has a cap of about $145 million a year, something like that. They've got the same, not all of them can use that, but the top teams all max out that budget as much as they can. So you've got the same number of resources, access to the same kind of technology, access to the same kind of tools. But what makes a difference is team strategy and that kind of coordination and infrastructure layer. And that's what really separates a first place out from a fourth place in Formula One. Many, many times you'll have the best car on the track not doing as good a job as a team that's better coordinated. I mean, there's been a lot of controversy with Max Verstappen at Red Bull, with performance kind of dipping and then going right back to a really good place after a new team principal comes along and shakes things up a bit. But then you've got Mercedes just always running like a well-oiled machine, just consistently always scoring pretty near the top there. The difference is coordination. You can have the best tech, but the best tech, the best tools really can't always win unless you've got great people, a great team, and great systems. And we're seeing that in the AI space now as well. Everyone has equal access to tools now. The barrier to entry to using the most powerful tools on the planet in a technological sense, the barrier's never been lower for your average person. But the difference is what the individual person brings, what the team brings into the technology that really makes the magic happen.
Yeah. I mean, you're so close to Google Ads. I mean, and Google Ads obviously is the engine, the revenue engine behind Google, arguably perhaps the most impactful, company in the world.
Mm.
But like you said, there is this kind of like seismic shift occurring, and you could argue Google is ushering in that with Gemini and whatnot, right? But I'm just curious, like, how is the space of Google Ads changing as a function of these LLMs now? Like you said, it is democratized now. Everybody can kind of do really stellar, they're not throwing garbage at the system anymore, I assume. So what does that mean though? Like you said, it's more about the team, but can you just expand a little bit more about that?
I think there are two components here, and I can talk about the team component a lot more first, and then we can talk about what's happening with Google as a company and advertising as a huge part of business and how that's kind of all changing a bit. Going a bit deeper onto the team side of things, one of the reasons why we have chosen to keep a small team instead of growing into several dozen strong or several hundred strong sort of agency model is people really like the high trust environment that we've created with our team, where who you talk to at the beginning of the process are the same people that you talk to throughout the process. And you have on your team, like, they're fixtures. You don't just get passed around rep after rep after rep. It's not the kind of business that we wanted to build when we built What Advertising. And that kind of comes down to some of my core ethos, which right at the beginning of the business, I had it written up on my wall, is that I thoroughly enjoy spending time with a key relationship in all my business partnerships. And the more I focused on that, the more it's become true. And a big part of that is creating really high trust environments where we're not some vendor, but we're on your team. And whether things are going well or going miserably, like, we're there to fix the problems and be on site. And you can do that effectively with a compact team. What that really means is the level of competence per person in the organization is so much higher than if you work with a very, very large company. And it allows us to do things that other folks in the advertising space struggle to do well. And where we find ourselves winning business against our competitors is that level of organization. And I'll give you an example. Right now, we're running ads for, I didn't expect to end up doing something in the education space, but we're running ads for charter schools through an organization that develops funding options for people that want to start putting a school together in underserved areas. They also own some real estate and help people get connected to real estate for school buildings, things like that. And then marketing is one part of what they do. And that's where they needed a lot of help. They've been relying, actually, I'll just sprinkle some AI in here. They've been relying very heavily on Performance Max, which is the most AI-ified version of a Google ad campaign that you can use at the moment. And while it has a place in lots of account strategies and filling in the gaps of traffic and reaching people you might not otherwise be able to, we don't allocate an enormous amount of budget towards that, maybe 20% max for an overall strategy. But generally, we still love traditional search campaigns that are keyword focused and intent focused. It really keeps that finger on the pulse with what people are looking for and what you can provide right in front of them once they make the search. When we took on this client, we had some practice in working with large multi-account situations. For example, we worked with over 100 therapy clinics last year through a marketing company that was focused on that space. We took over all of the ad management for them. And so we'd had a bit of practice with that level of complexity. But in this case, for this year, it's probably going to be between 20 to 50 ad accounts, maybe a couple dozen schools. Some of them are running on Google Ads and Meta Ads. Some of them are just Google Ads. But the level of organization is what's made it possible for us to run and manage these ad accounts with a compact team. And AI really did help with that picture. I wouldn't say it would have been possible without it, really. The breakthroughs in AI recently have made a whole new set of situations possible that weren't before. But it's the team that's the most important thing still, because the technology is changing very quickly. And I believe that a year from now, we could build something better and more suited to purpose. And we couldn't do that without a really high quality team. The big breakthrough that we had was we developed a brand new account management software using Replit, the no-code app development solution. And so what we were able to do with that was build a big account dashboard that was client-facing as well as internal-facing. It's kind of separate from some of our core systems, but also we built a whole ticketing system in there so that people could create tickets associated with specific accounts that are developed as part of this whole app. And that's now our primary mode of communication with the client. It saved dozens of hours from our team a month already since launching this. It took 2 weeks to develop and get live. It took about $600 in Replit server costs, but it would have cost between $50,000 to $80,000 if you went to a traditional app development process. And basically, I put my old user experience hat on from the medical practice website days. And I was like, I know what to do to create a really sleek, intuitive user experience. So I never thought I'd really use that knowledge again, but I was able to import that knowledge and without any code, develop this thing. But then again, it was the team. I couldn't have got it live with a client in 2 weeks if the team hadn't been testing this thing relentlessly for hours and hours and hours. And I said, look, I'm so close to this. I'm building it, but I need all these various use cases tested because you understand what the client needs in some ways better than I do. You understand some of those conversations better. We need to make sure it's super sleek and functional. And since launching, we've added a couple of new features, but in terms of bugs, there have been 2 bugs and they've taken minutes to fix. This is exceptional. This is groundbreaking. This has never been possible before. This is new as of 2026. It's blowing my mind. But the technology is exciting, but it's not the most powerful thing. That's my argument here. It's still people. People empowered by technology, sure, but the people and the coordination layer of the people, that's a superpower. You can't replace that with a new iteration of AI. You can't just dispose of it completely.
You talk a lot about mindset, yoga, meditation. and high frequency alignment. How does that spiritual side show up in how you run your business?
That's a really good question. And I'm hearing kids in the background for you.
Yeah, babies are
Which,
home.
which is awesome. I've got an amazing little son. Parenthood really teaches you a lot about that spiritual journey, for sure. It awakens you spiritually more than like all the meditation. I feel all the kind of like practice type things that you do. You really step through a threshold if you have the privilege of becoming a parent. But where my journey in spirituality really interfaces with things is like a lot of what you learn when you have a meditation practice is observation. And of course, a lot of that's observation of the thoughts, what's going on inside you, what your emotional states are. And as you're able to really understand what's happening inside your physiology, and there are great practices like yoga nidra, by the way, which are these, it's like a guided meditation where you lie down and instead of taking a nap, you do a body scan. And that activates your rest and restoration part of your nervous system, your rest and relaxation, instead of your fight and flight, which is constantly on these days with being vividly connected with these extremely stimulating technologies. So that kind of came out of my meditation and yoga practice in the last 2 years, and I use yoga nidra maybe 2 to 3 times a week minimum. You feel like you've just had like a 3 or 4 hour nap, even if you can just invest 15 minutes doing this body scan. But one of the things it does is it puts you in touch with your body and what's going on inside of you. And the more you understand these processes that are happening inside of you, mentally, emotionally, physically, the more aware you become of external processes as well and how the world works. Another meditative practice, it's one of my favorites, is cooking. Marco Pierre White, the multiple Michelin star awarded chef, he always talks about investing your time and taking your time, paying very close attention to the process, using all your senses. You can hear whether if you're like cooking some meat, if the moisture is evaporating off, or if the fat is starting to render and it's starting to cook in its own fat. Things like that. When you pay attention to a process, whatever it is, there are these universal lessons you can take from paying attention and being mindful that you can take into absolutely everything. And then suddenly you see it in a business process. Suddenly you see it in how you're integrating AI inside of your company and inside your client processes. It all connects together in a really counterintuitive way because it doesn't look productive when you're doing it. It doesn't look like you're achieving anything. But it's that kind of right brain creative side where if you give that the space and room to breathe, all of a sudden you can have the kinds of breakthroughs that you would never have expected. It's the unpredictable, productive work. And you need to have it. Otherwise, you don't get these sorts of high-level insights and breakthroughs. This whole thing is like you have the big ideas when you're in the shower. When suddenly you're not on your phone, you're not overstimulated. Suddenly, I've got this I'm staring at the shower wall and suddenly this thing strikes. And you can't predict it. You can't predict how and when it will happen. But as someone with an engineering sort of training, that's been very difficult for me because I've always felt like I've had these creative faculties. But when you're trained a lot of your life to think more logically and linearly, it can be a tough adjustment. But I feel like I'm making great progress in that adjustment and using all parts of my brain, more parts of my brain, whole brain thinking, basically. And that's been a huge part of my spiritual, mental, and business journey for sure.
Cool, man. Love to hear it. So maybe help me land the plane now, man. 5 years from now, what does what advertising look like? What kind of impact do you want to have?
It's a great question. It's something that we talk a lot about in our company is where we're going to be in 3, 5, 10 plus years from now. We use the Traction system, the book Traction by Gino Wickman, EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System. If anyone listening has not read that and needs to get a grip on their business, I think that's the terminology they use, highly, highly recommend the book and the system. You can make huge strides in a matter of weeks, which can help you gain clarity and sanity in the business. So we've been using that for about 3 years now. And it completely changed the direction of the business. We started saying no to a lot more things. We got a lot clearer on our ideal client profile. We got a lot clearer on where we wanted to go and how we wanted to fit into the market and fit into our clients' businesses. Basically, where we're going is we want to become marketing infrastructure that becomes utterly indispensable for our clients. Basically, we want to provide a service so good that it makes sense to work with us for 10 years plus because we make that much of a difference to the business. Of course, in any business, you've got 3 core pillars. There are more, but 3 core ones. You've got operations, sales and marketing, and finance. And we're getting really, really, really good at the sales and marketing arm. We offer truly exceptional advertising services, but we also have call handling available. If people are struggling with speed to lead, with picking up the phone with all the leads that we're sending them, you solve that problem and you can make your ads 3 times more effective easily. And so we want to be extremely valuable in the market for companies that have extremely complex advertising needs. And they need that complexity handled for them because all the tools we have available, a lot of things can be automated, but it's still a human game. We're advertising to humans. And so a human needs to be in the loop no matter how powerful the technologies we're using get. And that's our superpower in the market. And that's where we aim to serve.
I love that. Well, we've got 21 people listening live with us. And
hey, hello, everyone.
Yeah, everyone else that checks in the future, thank you all for listening in. This was great. Anything else you want to share in terms of maybe your website, where people can learn more about you? Do you blog somewhere or is it LinkedIn?
Sure. Great question. So best place really to get in touch with me is LinkedIn. It's where I'm the most responsive. Like if you connect with me and message me on LinkedIn, you will get a reply within a day or 2 easily. And I have a newsletter, which I'm restarting this year. It used to be extremely consistent every single week with sort of my adventures, my philosophical musings, which people might have had a bit of a taste of here today, and everything that we have coming through the works for our existing and new clients at What Advertising. We're kicking that off again, and there will be more information about that all my content on LinkedIn as we get that rolling as well. So LinkedIn's really the hub to get in touch with me, keep up to date on what we're up to, etc. So that's the best bet.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you all for tuning in, and until next time, and Sam will just hang back a minute here.